This was the most heartbreaking scene I had ever seen. Two people were pierced by a metal rod, barely clinging to life. The doctors who came to treat them were shocked by what they saw. Each of their faces showed a heavy expression, but the patients were particularly cheerful.
Well, in that case, does anybody have a breath mint?
After a brief moment of laughter, the doctors roughly understood the situation. Looking at the steel rod, they carefully pushed them to take an x-ray. The patients were in good spirits along the way. From their conversation, it was known that the two were strangers. The accident had brought them together. They talked as if they were old friends, chatting about daily life. The doctors were initially worried about their low spirits, but it seemed their concerns were unfounded. The journey was smooth, and people made way for them when they saw them. Finally, the test result came out. The rod had pierced the aorta. It couldn't be forcibly removed, so they first needed to be moved off the rod, but no matter which side was moved, the person being moved would die from massive bleeding. In the end, after comprehensive comparisons, everyone agreed to move the more severely injured woman because she had lost feeling below her legs. The man's survival rate was higher and his feet could be moved completely. The doctor finally informed the two of their decision. The man insisted on sacrificing himself.
If anybody has to go, it should be me. You just move out.
Although they didn't know each other before, as a man, he wanted to give the woman a chance to live.
It's not right. It's not fair.
Tom, it's not fair either way. Is my Danny? Is he here yet?
There are delays up there, bro. The storm.
We could wait, but the longer we do, the higher the risk of infection.
No, this is better.
Everyone was ready. Then the woman was quickly pulled off the rod. The doctors worked quickly to save her, but despairingly her aorta had already ruptured. No amount of resuscitation could help. They had no choice but to move on to save the man. Watching everyone swiftly change gloves, Dr. Gray couldn't accept it,
You can't just abandon her.
but the others seemed as if they hadn't hurt her. At that moment, Dr. Bailey
So much
said,
damage. There was never anything we could do. We have to let her go. Time of death 3:49.
Christmas had arrived. A little girl looked at Santa Claus, who was handing out candy, and asked her mom to go with her to get some. But her mom was trying to call her dad. Her dad was a pilot, and as expected, the call didn't go through. The woman had already grown used to this. Such was life in a pilot's family. Her friend beside her began to comfort her. Just then the girl turned around, and to her surprise, saw her dad not far away. She quickly pointed him out to her mom. At first, the mom didn't believe it, but as she walked closer, she realized it really was him. The man was stunned. Everyone was looking at him, and he didn't know how to explain. He turned and ran. The woman immediately chased after him, but at that moment an accident happened. The man was struck by an oncoming streetcar and fell to the ground. The woman quickly called 911. Paramedics arrived soon after and found the two women arguing heatedly. The man lay on the ground, his lower leg severely fractured. He needed to be rushed to the hospital. Firefighter Buck was curious about how the man managed to juggle both lives. The man explained that he had 2 rings and 2 phones and asked Buck if he could pretend to have amnesia to buy him some time. Meanwhile, Captain was trying to mediate, but this situation was a first for him too. Just then, one woman looked at the other's child. When she realized the child was older than hers, she suddenly understood she was wife number 2. To prevent the man from getting hurt again, they hurried him to the hospital.
I love you both.
Captain asked if they wanted to go along, but both women turned and left in unison. However, the next day, the 2 women were back at the hospital arguing loudly. A security guard tried to intervene, but ended up with a bloody nose. The cop told them, "You two are stuck with each other. You've got to figure out a way to put those aside for your kids. They've already got a part-time father. They don't need a long-distance mother doing 3 to 6. Hearing this, the 2 women suddenly understood. They decided to stand together and face things as a team. At that moment, the man was wheeled out. He thought he would be forgiven, but instead, they both asked for a divorce. The man was stunned on the spot.
But it's Christmas.
It was the best decision the women had ever made, and the children went on to share an unforgettable Christmas together. Even firefighters have moments of helplessness. At the last moment, with no way to escape, Lieutenant Casey took off his oxygen mask to call his wife Dawson.
Gabby, you're the best thing that ever happened to me. I love you. Bye, Gabby.
Everyone's heart sank to the bottom. Just moments ago, a warehouse in the suburbs caught fire. From the survivors who escaped, it was learned that many workers were still trapped inside. The firefighters quickly launched a rescue. However, as they entered the building, Chief Bowden suddenly noticed the fire source in the trusses. If they collapsed, the firefighters inside would be in grave danger. He then notified everyone to evacuate immediately. At that moment, firefighter McColland suddenly collapsed.
Mayday! Mayday! I think Madge is having a heart attack!
As if adding insult to injury, the trusses burned through and collapsed entirely. Fireballs shot into the sky, and the shattered trusses fell with a deafening crash, blocking the exits completely. Harriman had no choice but to drag McColland to a safe spot first, but he realized the fire was out of control. Outside, the firefighters were frantic. They begged to go in and help. Suddenly, a fireball burst out from the doorway. The only entrance was sealed off.
All right, entrance is blocked. You put mouths on your shoulder if you have to, but you get the hell out. Casey, evacuate that building any way you can.
Casey tried to break through the wall to escape, but the brick wall didn't budge. Others trapped inside were equally powerless. McCollin's condition worsened by the second, and the temperature kept rising. Time was running out, maybe just 1 minute left. In this final moment, Casey gave his time to his wife, also a firefighter.
Gabby.
Don't say
I want you to remember us happy together. You're my miracle, Gabby. I love you.
At this critical juncture, Bowden calmed himself down. He instructed the firefighters inside to find cover as quickly as possible. While preparing to open up the water cannons outside,
Chief, you boiled him alive. What choice do I have?
and so, the water cannons were fired simultaneously. The worst off was Herman. He used his own body to shield McColland. Enduring the searing heat around him, when the fire was finally extinguished, he was severely burned in multiple areas, but continued trying to save the barely breathing McColland. Casey, hiding under a cabinet, protected the injured beneath him before passing out. After months of recovery, Casey finally returned to the firehouse. Chief Bowden personally awarded him a Medal of Honor, saluting this group of heroic firefighters. A plane was getting ready to land, but the staff in the control tower cowered under the desk in fear, because according to the radar display, the landing plane was heading straight towards the tower. Just as the plane about to land, it suddenly disappeared from the radar. They initially thought it was a signal issue, but the next moment, all the planes preparing to land vanished from the radar. This scene terrified everyone. Fortunately, the supervisor remained calm in the crisis. She instructed her colleague to contact other towers to take over the planes, but as soon as she finished speaking, the plane that had disappeared suddenly reappeared on the radar and was speeding towards the tower. They quickly took out binoculars to look, but the clouds obstructed their view.
We're not gonna see it till it's right on us.
However, evacuating the tower was no longer an option, and there were still 239 passengers on the plane. So the supervisor instructed everyone to hide under the desks and prepare for the plane to crash into the tower. Then she took out signal lights to aim outside, trying to alert the other side that this was a control tower.
226, pull up and go around. You are lined up with the tower, not the runway. Pull up, pull up. Pull up!
But as they nervously prepared for the impact, they found that there was nothing outside. Just as everyone was puzzled, a colleague received a notification. It turned out that the plane had been taken over by another control tower. The situation just now was simply a system malfunction. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing this. At that moment, the tower's system suddenly rebooted. The supervisor thought everything had returned to normal. However,
all your systems belong to us. To get them back, send 25 million. Click the link below.
the man said his colleague George had lost his footing and fallen in. Lieutenant Casey carefully climbed onto the truck. He found George submerged up to his chest in a grain-like material in the truck bed, exhibiting signs of distress and restricted breathing. At that moment, George was still sinking continuously. Casey attempted to grab him, but was unsuccessful. After several attempts, he finally grasped George's hand and said to him, "You are not dying on me." Meanwhile, other team members hurriedly brought planks and ladders. By then, George was on the verge of suffocation. Casey kept talking to him to keep him conscious. They carefully positioned planks around George to distribute weight and prevent additional grain movement. Using shovels, they removed the grain around him, gradually freeing his lower body. Together, they pulled George out and placed him on a stretcher. At that point, he had fallen unconscious due to asphyxiation and needed to be transported to the hospital immediately.